In other world news, Thailand's Crown Prince has reassured his people there'll be a smooth succession to the throne. He's issued a royal decree naming a former prime minister as regent as the country mourns the death of their much-loved king. Scott Heidler is live for us now in Hua Hin. And Scott, you're in a place that the late king had a very special connection to.
Absolutely, fully. Now we're standing here in Hua Hin. It's about 200 kilometers south of Thailand. And yes, there's a very special connection, like many of the millions of Thais, but this place has a very, very special connection to him because they consider him to have been a local. His summer palace is here, and he spent a lot of his later years here in this community, and there was a direct interaction between the king and the people who live in Hua Hin. Just down the coast from the late king's summer palace, Siriwan Sangnam manages her family's restaurant of 40 years. She's been working with her father since it opened when she was just 11 years old. In his more active days, King Bhumobil was part of the community here in Hua Hin. He regularly taught classes at this school right next to the palace compound. The king once conducted a class in which Siriwan was a student.
I didn't want him to leave us. I wanted to see his health improving. I didn't want to lose him as suddenly as this.
She felt the king cared especially for the people of Hua Hin, and did so even when his health was failing. With the lengthy mourning period just starting, it's still unclear what economic impact it could have on the ever-important tourism industry here in Thailand. And some tourists here in Hua Hin are a little bit confused about what they should and should not be doing.
Well, we don't know if there's something we cannot do. So if that applies, then yes, then we would be confused about it. But it's not something that we have felt about.
Before we went to Thailand, we never knew anything about that king and how much the people love him and everything. And now our guide was just starting to cry and all the people were sad at once. And we went through the city and everything was closed.
And that means entertainment events have been canceled and tourist attractions are shut across the country. But there is no set period for how long they have to stay closed. Some will be reopening in a few days. Every day since the king died, Siriwan has come to this memorial just outside the main gate to his summer palace. She says she comes to pay her respects to her former king, her former teacher, and her former neighbor.
So, Scott, what are Thais doing in Hua Hin and elsewhere in the country to remember their king?
Well, what they're doing here in Hua Hin, and we're standing exactly where that vigil is that we just saw in that story, they come here every evening at 7 p.m., and they have been for the last 2 days, and it'll continue for another couple of days. There's a documentary that's played on a large screen television here, there are discussions, there's some music, and then there's a candle lighting vigil, as we saw in that piece, here in Hua Hin. On Sunday, today, across the country, there are going to be several separate events similar to this in different communities around the country. Now, what a lot of Thais, almost 70 million people who live here, a lot of Thais are hoping to make a trip to Bangkok to pay their personal respects to the king once that opens up in the Grand Palace, probably in the next 2 weeks. A lot of Thais hope they'll do that. But in the meantime, there are services, there are memorials, there are vigils like this in Hua Hin that are taking place right across this country.
Okay, Scott, thank you so much for that. Scott Heidler reporting there live from Hua Hin in Thailand.